The millionaire froze. No one had ever spoken so close to him. The maid trembled, but that whisper stirred something within him. 2 wounded hearts, a pure secret, a love born from a fright. Get ready. This sentence is about to become the beginning of the impossible. What do you think will happen in this story? Comment and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. Night fell over Regent Street like a heavy cloak, bringing with it the artificial glow of skyscrapers and the incessant hum of a metropolis that never sleeps. Marina watched from the window of the crowded bus as lights flickered in every corner, forming a sea of colours that brutally contrasted with London's dark sky. It was almost 8 in the evening, and she was on her way to work as always, swimming against the current of people returning home after an exhausting day. She was 24 years old and had, 2 years prior, left behind the small town of Stratford-upon-Avon, in rural Warwickshire, where she had grown up under the loving care of her grandmother, Helena. The decision to leave had not been easy. Grandma Helena, with her white hair always tied in a bun and hands calloused from so much work, cried softly at their farewell, but didn't try to stop her. She knew her granddaughter needed to find her own path, even if it meant exchanging her for the solitude of a giant city. Marina still remembered that day. The coach left at 6 in the morning, and Grandma Helena insisted on preparing a hearty breakfast. Sitting at the kitchen table with steaming cups in their hands, they remained silent for long minutes. "You'll go far, my child," Grandma Helena had said, her voice choked. "But don't forget where you came from. Don't forget that someone here loves you just the way you are." Marina had promised she would never forget. Every Sunday morning, without fail, she called her grandmother. Grandma Helena would talk about the news of the small town. Marina, in turn, would invent rosy stories about London, omitting the loneliness, the exhaustion, the feeling of being invisible in a sea of people. Life in the capital was very different from what she had imagined. In the first few months, she had shared a tiny room with 2 other girls in a tenement building in the East End. She had gotten the job at the Kensington Grand after 3 interviews and a quick customer service course. The salary barely covered rent, transport, and food. Gradually, Marina learned to survive. She learned to walk fast, not to make eye contact with strangers, to always have her Oyster card in hand. She learned that in London, no one cared if you were well or unwell, that everyone carried their own problems. It was a painful adaptation. But what marked her most was the invisibility. Marina had always been discreet, but back home people knew her. In London, she discovered it was possible to be surrounded by millions and still feel completely alone. She was just another anonymous face, another uniformed employee. No one truly saw her. Marina disembarked at the Underground station and walked through the illuminated streets to the Kensington Grand, an imposing glass and marble building situated in Mayfair, an upscale area of the capital. The hotel was known for hosting politicians, businessmen, and celebrities seeking discretion and 5-star comfort. There, she worked as a night receptionist from 9 in the evening to 7 in the morning, in shifts that completely inverted her biological clock and kept her distant from the world that pulsed under the sun. There was something ironic about working in such a luxurious place while living so modestly. Marina spent her nights attending to guests who paid for one night what she earned in a month, people who traveled the world as if going to the corner shop, who didn't need to look at the price of anything. She observed their designer clothes, their expensive watches, the carefree way they treated money, and felt a mixture of fascination and sadness. It wasn't exactly envy, but a painful realization of how different lives could be. Entering through the staff access, she greeted the security guards with a discreet nod and headed to the changing room. The space was shared by all night shift employees, a small room with metal lockers and a foggy mirror. She changed her simple cotton blouse for the hotel's impeccable uniform, a grey set with gold details that gave her a professional, albeit impersonal, appearance. She tied her brown hair into a low bun, applied a pink lipstick, and observed her reflection in the mirror for a few seconds. Her green eyes, which once shone with dreams and hopes, now carried an expression of contained tiredness. She looked older than she was, The subtle dark circles, which even concealer couldn't completely hide, betrayed the sleepless nights and fragmented sleep during the day. She now lived in a rented room in Islington, a 6-square-meter cubicle with a window facing a grey wall. She didn't have her own kitchen, just an electric hot plate and a mini-fridge. The bathroom was shared with other tenants on the floor, but it was hers, it was clean, and it was relatively close to work. It was enough for now. At the reception desk, she found Roderick, the colleague who worked the afternoon shift. Roderick was a friendly man in his 30s, black, always with some funny story. He came from Birmingham and had also arrived in London looking for opportunities. "Hey Marina, how's it going?" he said with a slight accent. "It was busy here today. A group of Japanese businessmen arrived early, a mix-up with reservations. And Simon is watching everything. There was a guest complaint and he got agitated. Better keep everything in order today." She nodded. Simon Maxwell was the hotel manager, a man in his early 40s, thin and always impeccably dressed. He had neatly cut grey hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and a rigid posture. Also from humble origins, the son of a doorman and a cleaner, he had climbed the hotel hierarchy based on iron discipline and pragmatism bordering on coldness. Simon believed that excessive friendliness was a sign of weakness. For him, the hotel was an organism that needed to function with surgical precision. He tolerated no mistakes and had a gaze that seemed to see through people. Marina had always been a little afraid of him. Simon had never been rude, but he had never shown cordiality either. He treated everyone the same way, with cold, efficient politeness. "I'm off then," Roderick said, grabbing his backpack. "Anything, just text me. And don't forget to grab your coffee around 3 in the morning," he added with a wink. Marina smiled. Roderick was one of the few good things about that job. He and Mrs. Celia, the lady who cleaned the lobby during the early hours and always stopped to chat for a few minutes, sharing homemade biscuits and motherly advice. They were small gestures of humanity that made the nights less lonely. The first hours of the shift passed in relative calm. Marina did a few check-ins, answered phone calls, organized reservations, and resolved minor issues with the discretion of someone who had learned not to draw attention. It was as if she had developed the ability to be present without truly existing, a competent shadow who fulfilled her role and disappeared. Guests rarely looked her in the eye. They made their requests looking at their phone screens or the ceiling, or anywhere but her face. Marina was just a polite voice, efficient hands, typing on the computer, a grey uniform. Around 11 at night, when the movement had already subsided and only a few guests were passing through the gleaming lobby, the revolving glass door opened and a man entered. Marina automatically looked up, the customary smile already on her lips. But something about him made her pause for a fraction of a second. He was tall, must have been about 38, and wore an impeccably tailored navy blue suit that certainly cost more than she earned in 6 months. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it repeatedly. He had broad shoulders, an upright posture, and walked with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. But what caught Marina's attention most was the expression on his face. Despite his confident posture and firm stride, there was a tiredness in his brown eyes that no expensive clothing could disguise. It was the kind of tiredness that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul. She knew that look well, because she saw it in her own mirror every day. It was the look of someone carrying too much weight, who had forgotten what it meant to truly rest. "Good evening," he said, approaching the counter with firm but unhurried steps. His voice was deep, well modulated, the kind of voice that conveys authority without needing to exert effort. "Good evening, sir. How may I help you?" Marina replied, quickly regaining her professional composure and returning her gaze to the computer screen. "I have a reservation, Edward Alistair." She typed the name into the system and confirmed the information. Presidential suite, 1-week stay. As she processed the check-in, filling in details and preparing the keycard, she felt his gaze on her. It wasn't an invasive or disrespectful gaze, but there was a genuine curiosity that made her slightly uncomfortable. Marina was used to being ignored, treated as part of the hotel furniture. She didn't know how to react when someone actually looked at her. "Is this your first time in London, Mr. Alistair?" she asked, following the hotel protocol of making polite small talk while processing the check-in. No, I've lived here for many years, actually. I just prefer to stay in hotels when I need some time away from everything, he replied, and there was something in his voice that suggested more than the words said. A kind of existential weariness, perhaps even a desire for escape. Marina nodded, not quite knowing what to say. She handed him the key card along with an explanatory folder about the hotel's services. Your suite is on the 14th floor, Mr. Alistair. Breakfast is served from 6 to 10:30 in the restaurant on the 2nd floor. If you need anything, you can call reception at any time. We are at your disposal. Thank you, he said, taking the key. And he hesitated for a moment, as if wanting to say something more. His eyes met hers again, and Marina felt something strange in her stomach, a kind of nervousness she couldn't explain. What's your name? The question caught her off guard. Guests rarely asked employees' names. Marina, sir. Marina, he repeated, as if trying out the sound of the name. It's a beautiful name. Thank you, sir, she replied, feeling her cheeks flush slightly. He nodded, put the key in the inside pocket of his jacket, and headed toward the lifts. But before entering, he turned and looked at her one last time. Their gazes crossed for an instant that seemed to stretch beyond the normal, and then Edward entered the lift and disappeared. Marina stood behind the counter, her heart beating a little faster than usual. It was absurd. He was just another guest, probably a rich businessman who wouldn't even remember her the next day. She shook her head, pushing away foolish thoughts, and returned to the computer to finish the day's report. But her fingers trembled slightly on the keyboard, and she had to take a few deep breaths to regain concentration. The following hours dragged on with the characteristic slowness of the early morning. Marina attended to a few more late arriving guests, answered emails, and organized the next day's reservations. Around 2 in the morning, when the hotel finally seemed to fall asleep along with the city, she allowed herself a break. She took one of the books she always carried from her bag, a used copy of Clarice Lispector that she had bought at a second-hand bookstore on Charing Cross Road. Reading was one of the few pleasures she allowed herself, a window into worlds that seemed infinitely more interesting than her own. She particularly liked Clarice because the author was not afraid to delve into the depths of the human soul to talk about loneliness, emptiness, the search for meaning. There was something comforting in discovering that other people, even those separated from her by decades and completely different realities, felt the same anxieties and asked the same unanswered questions. She was so engrossed in reading The Passion According to G.H. that she almost didn't notice someone approaching the counter. She automatically looked up and felt her heart give a little jump. Edward Alistair stood before her, now casually dressed in dark jeans and a white long-sleeved shirt. His hair was still slightly messy, and he looked even more tired than before. Sorry to bother you, he said with a half-smile that revealed a dimple on his face. I can't sleep, and I thought I'd go for a walk. Do you know of any place that's still open at this hour? Marina placed the book on the counter, carefully marking the page. There are a few diners in the Soho area that are open until late. The City Diner is open 24 hours. There's also a bakery on Bond Street that opens at 4 in the morning if you'd like fresh coffee. He looked at the book she had left on the counter. Clarice Lispector, he said with a glimmer of interest in his eyes. The Passion According to G.H. It's one of the densest books I've ever read. You know Clarice Lispector? Marina asked, surprised. It wasn't common to find people, especially businessmen, who read the author. Yes, I do. I've read a few of her books, though I confess it's sometimes difficult to follow. She writes in a very visceral, very raw way. She's not afraid to show the ugly side of things. That's exactly what fascinates me about her, Marina replied, feeling strangely at ease talking about it. She's not afraid to show the deepest and sometimes most disturbing side of human emotions. It's as if she tears off all masks and shows what we really are underneath all this civility. Edward leaned his elbows on the counter in a posture that indicated he was in no hurry to leave. And have you always liked to read? Since I was little, my grandmother always said that books were the best company when you felt lonely. And she was right. There are days when the only time I feel truly alive is when I'm reading. I understand perfectly, he said with a sincerity that surprised her. Sometimes fiction seems more real than reality, doesn't it? Yes, Or maybe it's just more honest. Silence. A silence that was not uncomfortable, but full of mutual understanding. Marina realized she was talking to this man as if she had known him for a long time, which was completely strange. She was usually reserved, especially with hotel guests, but there was something about Edward that made her feel safe to open up, if only a little. "Does your grandmother live here in London?" he asked. "No, she lives in rural Warwickshire, in Stratford-upon-Avon. It's a small town, everyone knows everyone, very different from here. And you came here looking for opportunities?" Marina hesitated. She didn't like talking about herself, especially about her motivations and frustrations. But this man looked at her with genuine interest, without judgment, just sincere curiosity. "I came because I needed to try something different. Opportunities there are very limited. I thought I could build something better here." "And are you succeeding?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that so directly. She looked down at her hands, resting on the counter. "Honestly, I don't know. Most days I just try to survive. I try to pay the bills, get a few hours of sleep, not give up. Building something still seems very distant." "I understand perfectly," Edward said, and there was a deep sincerity in his voice. "Sometimes we get so lost trying to build an empire, accumulate achievements and prove something to the world, that we completely forget to live. Forget what really matters." Marina looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability of that confession. She had imagined that a man like him, successful enough to stay in the presidential suite of a five-star hotel, had everything figured out. But she realized she was wrong. Beneath the impeccable suit and confident posture, there was someone as lost as she was, perhaps even more so. "What keeps you awake at this hour, if I may ask?" Edward sighed. "Insomnia. Or maybe it's just the weight of carrying too many responsibilities. Sometimes I lie in the dark for hours, thinking about everything I need to resolve, all the decisions I need to make, all the people who depend on me. And when I finally manage to sleep, I wake up worse than I was." Marina nodded. She knew that feeling well. "I know how it is. There are nights when, even when I'm off, I can't rest properly. I keep thinking about the bills I need to pay, the things I still need to resolve, if I'll manage to save enough money to visit my grandmother. My mind doesn't stop." "We're more alike than it seems," Edward said, with a sad half-smile. They remained silent for a few moments, just looking at each other. Something was forming there, a delicate connection like a spider's web, fragile but real. Marina felt she was in front of someone who truly saw her, who looked beyond the grey uniform and the customary smile, and that was both frightening and comforting at the same time. "Well, I think I'll take your suggestion and go for a walk," Edward finally said, breaking the moment. "Thank you for the directions, Marina." "You're welcome, Mr. Alistair." "Edward," he corrected. "You can call me Edward." "Edward, then," she replied, with a small but genuine smile. He exited through the revolving door, and Marina watched him disappear into the London night. She stood looking at the empty space for a few seconds, her heart still beating a little faster than normal. Then she returned to her book, but she couldn't concentrate on the words anymore. Her mind was elsewhere, reliving the conversation, analyzing every word, every glance. That was just the first of many conversations. In the following days, Edward returned almost every night for small talks in the early hours, always with a different excuse. Sometimes he asked for restaurant recommendations, other times he inquired about tourist spots or simply commented on the weather. Marina knew the questions were just pretexts, and perhaps he also knew that she knew, but neither of them mentioned the obvious. A delicate game was being played, made of lingering glances, carefully chosen words, and silences full of meaning. Marina began to await those nightly encounters with an anxiety she hadn't felt in a long time. She started to do her hair more carefully, to apply her makeup more thoroughly, to choose her lipstick with attention. Small gestures that she didn't even realize she was making, until she caught herself thinking about him while getting ready. Edward, in turn, seemed to find in those conversations something he desperately needed, an oasis of authenticity in a desert of falsehood. Marina didn't know much about him beyond his name and the fact that he was a businessman, but she perceived that he carried heavy burdens. There was a deep loneliness in that man, a feeling of always being on display, always being judged, always having to maintain an impeccable image. In one of these conversations, Edward mentioned that he was going through a difficult phase in his business, that he had made some risky investments that hadn't worked out, that he was under pressure from partners and investors. He didn't go into detail, but Marina realized that he just needed someone to listen without judging, without offering unsolicited advice, without turning it into a networking opportunity. Marina, in turn, opened up about her life in Stratford-upon-Avon, about the grandmother who had raised her alone after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 5 years old. She told him about the afternoons helping Grandma Helena in the small grocery store she ran, about the winter nights around the wood stove, about the painful decision to leave in search of a better life. "Do you miss it there?" Edward asked one of those nights. "Every day. But at the same time, I know I can't go back, at least not now. It would be like admitting defeat, you know. I would return as the girl who tried and failed." "It wouldn't be defeat. It would just be a different choice." "Maybe. But people in the countryside don't see it that way. Everyone there has an opinion about other people's lives. If I go back without having achieved anything, they'll comment, make jokes, say I should have stayed where I was." "And do those people's opinions matter that much?" Marina thought for a moment. "I guess not, but my grandmother's opinion matters, and she had so many expectations when I left. I don't want to disappoint her. I'm sure your grandmother just wants you to be happy, Marina, regardless of where you are or what you do." She remained silent, feeling her eyes sting with tears that refused to fall. Edward was right. She knew it. But it was hard to accept that she might be sacrificing her happiness for an ideal of success that wasn't even hers. On Thursday of the week Edward was staying, Marina made a decision. It was completely out of character for her, but she felt an impulse she couldn't repress. Before her shift, she stopped at a bookstore on Regent Street and bought a used copy of The Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector. It was a navy blue book, worn by time, with some annotations in the margins made by the previous owner. Between the pages, she placed a red ribbon as a bookmark, and on the first page, she wrote in her careful, neat handwriting, "For when the weight of the world becomes too much." She didn't sign it. She put the book in her bag and spent the rest of the day nervous, questioning if she was doing the right thing. Was it too intimate a gesture? Would he find it strange? Would he misinterpret it? But something inside her told her she had to do it, that she needed to reciprocate in some way all those conversations that had made her feel less alone. When Edward appeared that early morning, Marina was attending to a guest who was making an enraged complaint about the room's air conditioning. Simon, who was doing a round of the hotel before leaving, observed the situation with his hawk eyes, assessing how Marina handled it. She managed to calm the guest, promising to send a maintenance technician immediately and offering a room upgrade as a courtesy. The man left still a little irritated, but less aggressive. Simon nodded in silent approval and retreated to his office. After the lobby was empty again, Edward approached the counter. "You handle difficult people very well," he commented. "It's part of the job. I've learned that most people who complain loudly actually just want to be heard." "Wise observation." Marina took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Edward, I wanted to give you something." He raised his eyebrows, surprised. "For me?" She took the book from under the counter and handed it to him with slightly trembling hands. "You had asked about Clarice Lispector. This one is one of my favorites. I thought you might like it." Edward took the book carefully, as if it were something precious and fragile. He opened it to the first page and read the dedication in silence. When he looked up at her, there was something different in his gaze. Emotion, surprise, perhaps even vulnerability. "Marina, I don't know what to say. This is very kind of you." She felt her cheeks flush. "It's nothing, I just thought you might need it." "Miss Costa," Simon's cold, cutting voice came from behind her, making her jump slightly in fright. "Could you come here for a moment, please?" Marina felt her blood run cold. Simon was standing near the lifts, arms crossed and an expression that boded no good. She looked at Edward with an apologetic expression and followed the manager to a more secluded corner of the lobby, out of earshot of the guests. "Miss Costa," Simon's tone was low but sharp as a razor, "this is not an appropriate place to make friends or distribute gifts to guests. You are here to work, to maintain a professional demeanor, not to form personal ties with clients." "I was just being kind, sir. He asked about books and I thought—" "I don't care about excuses," Simon interrupted. "I don't care about your justifications. What matters to me is that you are working in a 5-star hotel, not a neighborhood library. Guests are not here to receive your literary opinions or your presence. They are here to be served efficiently and discreetly. Maintain the appropriate professional demeanor, or you will have to look for employment elsewhere. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir." "Excellent. Now return to your post." Simon retreated with firm, precise steps, and Marina returned to the counter, feeling her cheeks burning with shame and her eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. Edward was still there, holding the book carefully. "I'm so sorry if I caused you trouble," he said, genuinely concerned. "It wasn't my intention." "It wasn't your fault," Marina replied, trying to keep her voice firm and controlled despite the whirlwind of emotions. "Simon is always like this. He thinks employees should be invisible. Still, I don't want you to have problems because of me. If you need, I can talk to him." "No, please," Marina said quickly. "That would only make things worse. He already dislikes it when employees draw too much attention. If a guest were to complain about him, it would be even worse for me." Edward looked at her for a long moment, and Marina saw frustration and helplessness in his eyes. "Then perhaps it's better if we keep our distance," she said, even though the words hurt to come out. "I need this job. I can't afford to lose it." "I understand," Edward said, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. "But I want you to know that this gift," he raised the navy blue book, "means a lot to me. More than you can imagine. It's been a long time since someone showed such a generous and sincere gesture towards me. Thank you, Marina, truly." He retreated slowly, and Marina was left alone at the counter, feeling a strange emptiness in her chest. She had done the right thing by setting boundaries. She knew that. She couldn't risk her job for a man who would probably forget her as soon as he left the hotel. But why then did she feel so bad? Why did she feel as if she had let something rare and precious slip away? The rest of the night dragged on in slow motion. Marina performed her tasks mechanically, answering guests, organizing papers, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of Edward, of the book, of the interrupted conversation, of Simon's gaze. She thought of how unfair it was that people like her couldn't aspire to anything beyond what they already had, that any attempt to be happy was seen as overstepping boundaries. When her shift finally ended and she stepped out into the grey London morning, she felt a tiredness that went beyond the physical. It was a tiredness of the soul, an exhaustion from trying so hard to remain invisible, from repressing her own desires and feelings. But then, as she opened her bag to get her Oyster card, she found an envelope that hadn't been there before. She opened it with trembling hands and found a simple card with no sender. The message was brief and handwritten in a firm, elegant script. "I know you asked for distance and I will respect that. But I need to tell you that it's been a long time since I met someone who made me want to be a better person. Thank you for showing me that there is still beauty and authenticity in the world. If you ever change your mind, I would love to offer you a coffee, or a tea, or just comfortable silence in a bookstore. The choice is entirely yours. Edward." Marina read and reread the note several times as the underground swayed through London's dark tunnels. She felt her heart beat faster, felt a small but genuine smile form on her lips. She carefully put the card in her wallet, along with a photo of her grandmother Helena, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel something akin to hope. Perhaps it was madness. Perhaps it would end in disappointment. Perhaps Simon was right, and she was overstepping boundaries she shouldn't. But at that moment, with the card tucked close to her heart, and the memory of Edward's gaze still vivid, Marina made a decision. She wasn't going to give up on that connection so easily. She wasn't going to let fear and social rules dictate her life. For the first time in a long time, she was going to allow herself to want something beyond just surviving. On Saturday night, before her shift began, Marina stopped at a stationery shop and bought a simple card. She wrote in her careful handwriting, "There's a century-old bookstore on Cecil Court in the city centre. Sunday, 3 in the afternoon, if you still want to, of course. Marina." On Monday, when Edward came down for breakfast, he found a small envelope discreetly left on his tray. Inside was Marina's card. He read it, reread it, and a genuine smile lit up his tired face. He put the card in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his heart, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Possibility. The feeling that perhaps life could be more than just obligations and responsibilities. Neither of them knew yet how much that encounter would change their lives, nor the obstacles they would face, nor the storms they would have to weather. But at that moment, with the rain beating against the windows and London waking up outside, with a navy blue book and two tired hearts allowing themselves to feel again, something delicate and rare began to blossom. It was fragile like a sprout breaking through asphalt, but it had the strength of authenticity, the beauty of true things. Sunday dawned with a grey sky over London, one of those that don't promise rain but also don't guarantee sun. Marina woke up at noon, after only 4 hours of sleep, her heart beating fast and an anxiety she couldn't control. The meeting with Edward was set for 3 in the afternoon at the century-old bookstore on Cecil Court, and she had no idea what to wear, what to say, or even if she should go. Throughout the week, ever since she had left the invitation on his tray, Marina had oscillated between excitement and regret. Sometimes she caught herself smiling alone, thinking about the meeting, imagining possible conversations, daydreaming like a teenager. At other times she was seized by panic. What was she doing? Since when did she, Marina Costa, from rural Warwickshire, think she could have something with a man like Edward? Grandma Helena had noticed something different in her voice during their call the previous Sunday. "Are you all right, my child? You sound more cheerful." Her grandmother had commented with her sharp intuition. Marina almost told her. She almost shared with her grandmother that secret she carried like a precious and fragile jewel. But she was afraid her grandmother would worry, afraid that by putting it into words everything would dissipate like a dream at dawn. So she just said she was fine, that work was the same, that London was still London. Now, standing before her tiny wardrobe, Marina felt the weight of that decision. She got up from the narrow bed and began to examine her clothes. They were all simple, practical, chosen, more for functionality than beauty. She had 3 almost identical pairs of jeans bought on sale, a few basic cotton blouses, her hotel uniform that took up half the space, a single skirt she had only worn twice. Nothing that seemed appropriate for a date with a man like Edward. She tried on several combinations, looking at herself in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Everything seemed wrong, either too simple or trying too hard. After half an hour and at least 10 outfit changes, she chose dark jeans, the least worn she had, a white 3/4 sleeve cotton blouse and a light beige jacket she had bought at a charity shop months ago and rarely wore. Simple but neat. She decided to leave her hair down, falling over her shoulders in natural waves. She applied light makeup, just concealer, mascara, and a pink lipstick. She looked in the mirror one last time and took a deep breath. She wasn't perfect, but she was herself, and if Edward truly cared, it was with her true self that he wanted to be. As she got ready, she tried to calm her disordered thoughts. What was she doing? Edward was clearly a successful man, probably rich, accustomed to a world completely different from hers. What could he want with a hotel receptionist who barely made rent? Maybe it was just fleeting curiosity. Maybe he was bored, and she was just a temporary distraction. But then she remembered his gaze, the sincerity in his voice when they spoke, the way he truly listened to her. It didn't seem to be just curiosity. It seemed to be something real, even if frightening and improbable. She left home at 2:30, took the underground from Islington Station and got off at St. Paul's. The station was relatively empty for a Sunday, with only a few tourists and homeless people occupying the corners. From there, she walked through the bustling streets of London's historic city centre until she reached Cecil Court. The historic centre of London on Sundays had a peculiar atmosphere. The shops were closed, the commercial buildings empty, but there was life on the streets in a different way. Street artists playing music, street vendors offering trinkets, people strolling unhurriedly. It was a more human, less frantic London. The bookstore was an old establishment, with a facade of Portuguese tiles and an intricately carved, wooden door that seemed to have witnessed decades of history. Marina had passed by there a few times, always admiring the facade, but had never entered. Bookstores like that seemed to belong to another world, a world where she didn't feel at ease. She arrived 10 minutes early and stood on the other side of the street, watching the entrance. Her heart was beating so fast she feared it could be heard. She was about to cross when she saw Edward approaching from the opposite corner. He wore jeans, a light blue long-sleeve shirt slightly rolled up at the wrists, and a brown leather jacket that fit him perfectly. Without the formal hotel suit, he looked younger, more approachable, more real. His hair was a little messy from the wind, and he carried the navy blue book she had given him in his hands like an amulet or a promise. When their eyes met across the street, Marina felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't just physical attraction, although Edward was undeniably handsome. It was something deeper, as if two souls who had been walking lost through life had finally found a point of connection. Edward smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face and made those discreet dimples appear on his cheeks. Marina felt her nervousness give way to something warmer, softer. She crossed the street, looking both ways, even though it was Sunday and traffic was light, and went to meet him. "You came," Edward said as she approached, and there was genuine relief in his voice, as if he had truly doubted she would show up. "I came," Marina replied with a shy smile. "And you came too. Wouldn't miss it for anything." He held up the book as if it were proof of his intention. "I started reading last night. Clarice Lispector is even more intense than I remembered. It's a reading that demands total surrender. You can't read it superficially." "True, every sentence seems to carry the weight of the world, and at the same time it makes you question everything about yourself." Marina smiled, happy to know that he was truly reading, truly engaging with the book. It wasn't just an empty gesture, a way to please her. Edward was genuinely interested. They entered the bookstore together, and Marina immediately felt transported to another time. The place had very high ceilings, with antique chandeliers hanging from the ornate plasterwork. Dark wooden shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with books organized by genre and author. There were narrow wooden stairs that creaked softly and led to a mezzanine filled with even more books. The scent was unmistakable and wonderful, a mixture of old paper, varnished wood, ancient dust, and fresh coffee from the small bistro at the back. There were few customers that Sunday afternoon. An elderly gentleman was browsing a thick volume in the history section. A young woman, probably a university student, was sitting on the floor between the shelves, completely immersed in her reading. A middle-aged couple examined art books. The atmosphere was one of reverent tranquility, as if that place were a temple dedicated to words. "Come on," Edward said softly, extending his hand to Marina. She hesitated for only a second before accepting. His hand was warm, firm, and as she touched it, Marina felt an electric current run through her body. They walked together among the shelves, fingers intertwined, exploring that universe of stories. They spent almost 2 hours wandering through the labyrinth of books. Edward proved to be surprisingly cultured and passionate about literature. He took books from the shelves, read passages aloud to Marina, his deep voice echoing softly among the shelves. He knew Machado de Assis deeply, quoted Guimarães Rosa from memory, recited Drummond's poems with genuine emotion in his voice. Marina discovered that behind the businessman was a man who loved words the same way she did, who found in books the same refuge, the same comfort, the same feeling of not being completely alone in the world. They talked about books that had marked them, characters that seemed to have been written specifically for them, phrases they kept in their hearts as talismans against difficult days. "Look at this one." Edward picked up a copy of Dom Casmurro. It was the first book that really made me question reality. Bentinho's doubt, Capitu's ambiguity. Machado was a genius at showing that absolute truth doesn't exist, that everything depends on the perspective of whoever tells the story. I always thought Capitu was unfairly treated, Marina commented. The whole book is narrated from the point of view of an obsessed and possessive man. Of course, we're going to question her honesty. Exactly, Edward smiled, animated. And this was written in the 19th century. Machado was decades ahead of his time, questioning the male narrative, showing how jealousy can completely distort the perception of reality. They continued talking, debating, agreeing and disagreeing about book interpretations. It was the kind of conversation Marina rarely had the opportunity to have. Back home, few read beyond what was necessary for school. In London, her acquaintances were more concerned with surviving than discussing literature. But there, at that moment with Edward, she could be completely herself. At one point, while they were flipping through a copy of The Devil to Pay in the Backlands together, looking for the famous passage about love and crossing, their fingers accidentally brushed against the page. It was a brief touch, seemingly insignificant to any external observer, but for both of them, it seemed to carry an electricity that made time stop for a full second. "Sorry," Edward said, quickly pulling his hand away, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "No need to apologize," Marina replied, feeling her cheeks flush and her heart beat faster. They looked at each other in silence, still holding the book between them. The soft hum of the bookstore, the distant voices of other customers, everything seemed to have faded into the background. At that moment, Marina realized that something was changing irreversibly. It was no longer just an intellectual connection or an improbable friendship. Something deeper was forming, something that frightened and attracted her at the same time, like being on the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping could be both liberation and a fall. "Would you like some tea?" Edward asked, gently breaking the moment. "I would." They sat at a discreet table in the bistro at the back, ordered tea and some slices of orange cake. The conversation flowed naturally, as it always did between them. Edward told her about his childhood in Cambridge, the son of an accountant and a teacher. He said that from an early age he showed a talent for business, that by 25 he had his first company, that by 30 he was a millionaire. "But it seemed that the more I achieved, the emptier I felt," he said, stirring his tea distractedly. "It's as if I had climbed a huge mountain, and upon reaching the top, realized that the view from there wasn't as special as I imagined." "And what exactly do you do?" Marina asked, realizing. They had never specifically talked about it. "I have a real estate investment company. We buy properties, renovate them, resell or rent them out. It's profitable, but it's also stressful and sometimes morally questionable. There's a lot of greed in the real estate market, a lot of speculation that ends up harming ordinary people." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes, yes. Not the success itself, but the way I achieved it. There are things I've done, decisions I've made, that keep me awake at night. I've contributed to the gentrification of entire neighborhoods, to the displacement of families who had lived in certain places for generations, all in the name of profit, growth, progress." There was genuine sadness in his voice, a weight Marina recognized. "But you can change that. You can use your power and wealth to do different things now." "I can. But it's complicated when you have partners, investors, people who expect financial returns. They don't care about social impact or moral conscience. They want numbers, profits, results. Then maybe it's time for you to free yourself from those expectations, to do what's right, not what's profitable." Edward looked at her with an intensity that made Marina look away. "You're incredible, you know that. You have a clarity and honesty that I haven't seen in a long time." "I'm not incredible. I'm just someone who learned that life is too short to waste on things that don't make sense." "And what makes sense to you?" Marina thought for a moment. "True connections, people who truly see you, not what you represent or what you can offer. My grandmother always said that at the end of life, we don't remember the things we bought or achieved, but the people we loved and the moments we lived. Your grandmother truly is a wise woman. She's the most important person in my life." They talked until 6 in the evening when the bookstore began to prepare to close. They walked out together onto the street where the twilight painted the sky orange and pink. London's city centre on Sundays had a different atmosphere, calmer, almost melancholic. "I can take you home," Edward offered. Marina hesitated. She didn't want him to see where she lived, the cramped little room, the dilapidated building. But she also didn't want that day to end. All right. Edward's car was a discreet black sedan, comfortable but not ostentatious. On the way to Islington, he asked about her dreams, her plans for the future. Marina spoke of her desire to one day have her own home, however simple, with a small garden where she could plant flowers like her grandmother. She spoke of her wish to pursue higher education, perhaps literature or psychology, but that the costs were prohibitive. "And if you could do anything, without financial limitations, what would you do?" Edward asked, stopping at a red light. "I think I'd go back home and open a community library, a place where people like me who can't afford to buy books could have access to reading. I'd organize discussion groups, book clubs, writing workshops, something that would really make a difference in people's lives." "That's a beautiful dream." "It's an impossible dream," Marina corrected, with a sad smile. No dream is impossible. When they arrived at the building where Marina lived, she was relieved to see that the street was empty. She didn't want Edward to see the homeless people who usually slept on the pavement, the accumulated rubbish on the corner, the peeling graffiti on the walls. "Thank you for bringing me," she said, picking up her bag. "Marina, wait." Edward gently held her arm. "Today was one of the best days I've had in a long time. I don't want it to be the only one." She looked at him, seeing the sincerity etched in his eyes. "I don't want it to be either. But you need to understand that our lives are very different. I wake up in the afternoon, work late at night, live in a cubicle, barely have time for myself. You have responsibilities, a company to run, a world I can't even imagine. I don't care about those differences. I care about what I feel when I'm with you. I care about the fact that for the first time in years I feel light. I feel truly seen." "Edward, this could go very wrong. Or it could go very right." They looked at each other in silence, with the car engine still running and the streetlights beginning to come on. Marina knew she should say goodbye, go into the building, return to her safe and predictable life. But a part of her, a part that had been silenced for so long, wanted to take the risk. "Call me tomorrow," she finally said. "Let's see where this goes." "I will call. I promise." Marina got out of the car and entered the building without looking back. But when she reached her room and looked out the window, the car was still there. Edward waited until he was sure she had safely entered before driving away. This small gesture made Marina's heart ache in a way she no longer knew was possible. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions. Edward kept his promise and called the next day. They talked for almost 2 hours about everything and nothing, he told her, about a difficult meeting with investors. She vented about a particularly rude guest. It was comforting to have someone with whom to share the small daily victories and frustrations. Their meetings became more frequent. Quick dinners between the end of her shift and his meetings. Sunday strolls through parks Marina had never visited. Trips to second-hand bookstores and libraries, a favorite pastime for both. Edward introduced her to restaurants she could never afford, but he always chose discreet, unpretentious places where they could talk quietly. Marina, in turn, showed Edward a London he didn't know. The simple pubs where the best homemade food in the city was served, the Sunday markets where you could find everything at affordable prices, the community poetry readings in deprived areas where poetry truly happened without pretense or elitism. Edward was enchanted by that world, by the authenticity of the people, by the culture that pulsed away from the spotlights. At the hotel, however, the situation was becoming complicated. Simon had noticed something was happening. Marina couldn't completely hide the sparkle in her eyes, the lightness in her movements, the smile that insisted on appearing even in the most exhausting moments. And Simon, with his hawk-like gaze, let nothing go unnoticed. One Wednesday night he called her into his office. Marina entered with a racing heart, sensing trouble. "Miss Costa, sit down," he said, pointing to the chair in front of his impeccably organized desk. She sat, keeping her hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. "I need to speak with you about your professional demeanor," Simon began, taking off his glasses and cleaning the lenses with a tissue. I've received comments from some employees about your conduct. Comments, sir? Yes. It seems you have been seen in compromising situations with a frequent guest, Edward Allister. Marina's blood ran cold. There's nothing compromising, sir, just polite conversations during my work shift. Miss Costa, don't underestimate me. I know exactly what's going on, and I need you to understand that this is absolutely unacceptable. This hotel has a reputation to uphold. We cannot have employees personally involved with guests. But I haven't done anything wrong. I've never neglected my work, never failed in my responsibilities. It's not just about performing your duties, it's about maintaining an appropriate professional image. Other employees are commenting. Guests may start commenting too. This creates an inappropriate environment. With full due respect, sir, what I do outside my working hours shouldn't be the hotel's concern. Simon's eyes turned cold. It should when it involves hotel clients, and especially when it can harm our reputation. What reputation? I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't stolen. I haven't been rude. I haven't failed to fulfill my obligations. Having a relationship with someone outside my working hours is not a crime. Simon's eyes became icy. I see you don't understand the gravity of the situation, so I'll be clearer. Either you end this involvement immediately, or you will have to look for another job. The choice is yours. Marina felt rage boil within her. This is unfair, and you know it. Life is unfair, Miss Costa. The sooner you accept that, the better. You have until Friday to decide. If you choose to keep your job, I want written confirmation that you have ended any personal relationship with Edward Allister. Otherwise, prepare your letter of resignation. He made a gesture indicating the conversation was over. Marina left the office, trembling with anger and humiliation. She went straight to the staff bathroom and locked herself in a cubicle. The tears she had held back in front of Simon finally fell, hot and bitter. They were tears not just of humiliation, but of rage. Rage at having her dignity questioned. Rage at someone thinking they had the right to define her place in the world. She stayed there for a few minutes, breathing deeply, trying to regain her composure. When she finally came out, she washed her face with cold water and reapplied her makeup. She wasn't going to let Simon win. She wasn't going to give up on Edward just because a frustrated man thought she wasn't good enough. But his words kept echoing in her mind. Was he right? Was she being naive to believe that something could work out between her and Edward? The differences between them were stark. He had a university education. She had barely finished secondary school. He traveled the world. She had never left the country. He frequented expensive restaurants. She saved up to buy a pastry at the bakery. That night, when her shift ended, she found Edward waiting for her at the back door of the hotel. It was a simple, yet significant gesture. He was there, even knowing it could cause problems for her. "Are you all right?" he asked as soon as he saw her, immediately noticing something was wrong. "Let's get out of here," she said, looking around, fearing someone might see them. They went to a 24-hour diner near Hyde Park. It was almost 8 in the morning, and the place was packed with workers having coffee before starting their day. They sat at a corner table, and Marina told him everything. The conversation with Simon, the accusations, the warning. Edward listened in silence, his jaw growing tenser. When she finished, he took her hand across the table. "This is harassment. He has no right to do that to you. He's my boss. He has every right." "He doesn't, and I can do something about it." "No, please." Marina pulled her hand back, alarmed. "That will only make things worse. I'm already under suspicion. If you get involved, they'll be sure something is going on between us and I'll be fired. Then resign. I can help you find another job, something better." "I don't want your help like that, Edward. I don't want you to solve my problems for me. I need to do this myself. But you're not alone. We're in this together." "Are we?" The question came out sharper than Marina intended. "Because sometimes I don't know what we're doing. What is this to you? Am I just a distraction? Someone different from your world who makes you feel less guilty about being rich?" Edward's face turned pale. "How can you think that? How can I not? You have a whole life I don't know. I don't know where you live. I don't know your friends. I have no idea what you do when you're not with me. For you, this might be a passing adventure, but for me, It's too real. Marina, look at me. Edward waited until she met his eyes. This is real for me too. More real than anything I've lived in recent years. And if I haven't taken you to my house or introduced you to my friends, it's because I was trying to protect you from that world, not hide you from it. Protect me from what? From people who will judge you, who will question why I'm with you, who will make nasty comments behind your back. My social circle is toxic, Marina. It's full of superficial people who measure people's worth by their bank balance. So you're ashamed of me? No, never. I'm ashamed of them. I'm ashamed of being part of that world. They remained silent for a long moment. Marina idly stirred her cold coffee as she tried to process everything. Part of her understood what Edward was saying. Another part felt diminished, as if she wasn't good enough to be introduced to the people in his world. Edward, I don't know if I can do this. It's too complicated. Too painful. I know. But I don't want to give up on you. On us. Maybe we need to take a break. Think better about all this. Don't say that, please. Marina saw the pain in his eyes and almost went back on her words. But Simon's words kept echoing, mixed with her own insecurities. Perhaps it was better to end it before she got hurt even more. Before she truly fell in love and couldn't turn back. I need to go. I'm tired and confused. I need to sleep and think. Can I take you home? I prefer to go alone. Marina stood up, grabbed her bag, and left the diner without looking back. She knew that if she looked, she wouldn't have the strength to leave. The tears began to fall as soon as she turned the corner, but she didn't stop walking. She walked to the underground station, entered a crowded carriage, and let herself be carried by the city's movement, feeling smaller and more lost than ever. In the following days, Edward tried to call several times. Marina didn't answer. He sent long and sincere messages. She read them all but didn't reply. She needed space to think, to understand what she really wanted, to decide if she was willing to face all the obstacles that a relationship with him would inevitably bring. At the hotel, Simon watched her closely, looking for any slip-up. Marina remained professional and distant, performing her tasks with mechanical efficiency, but the light that had shone in recent weeks was extinguished. She had returned to being the invisible shadow she had always been. Roderick noticed the change. Marina, what happened? You were doing so well these days, and now it seems you're back to square one. I just realized I was deluding myself with impossible things, she replied, organizing papers at the counter. Impossible is only what you don't try. Until the end. Sometimes trying isn't enough. But at least you don't live with the regret of not having tried. Marina didn't answer. She continued working, keeping to schedules, living on autopilot. It was safer that way, less painful. Or at least, that's what she tried to convince herself as she ignored the emptiness that grew inside her with each passing day without Edward. What she didn't know was that Edward was also suffering, and that sometimes true love demands more than security and predictability. It demands courage to face fear, to cross chasms, to fight against everything and everyone, when you find something truly worthwhile. 2 weeks had passed since Marina decided to distance herself from Edward. They were 14 days that seemed to drag on like years, each hour heavier than the last. She tried to convince herself that she had made the right decision, that she was protecting herself from greater pain in the future. But the truth was that she had never felt so empty, so devoid of color and life. Her phone vibrated constantly with messages from him. At first they were long, almost desperate, trying to explain his feelings, trying to convince her to give a chance to what might be between them. Edward wrote about the days without seeing her, about how the city seemed grayer, about how even books had lost some of their charm. Then the messages became shorter, more restrained, but no less sincere. Good morning, Marina. I thought of you today when I saw the sunset. I hope you're well. I saw a phrase in a book that reminded me of you, something about the courage to live despite fear. Simple messages that pierced Marina's heart every time she read them, usually late at night, when loneliness pressed hardest. Marina read each message, sometimes more than once, but never replied. She kept his words as one keeps old love letters, relics of a time that could have been but which she herself had chosen to end. There were nights when she typed long replies, pouring out everything she felt, but always deleted them before sending. It was safer that way, she told herself, less painful in the long run, but the truth was, it was painful anyway. It hurt to wake up and not have a good morning message from him. It hurt to pass a bookstore and not be able to share the discovery of an interesting book. It hurt to exist in a world where Edward also existed, but separated by a distance she herself had imposed. At the hotel, she had returned to being the invisible shadow she was before. The sparkle that had appeared in her eyes in recent weeks had completely faded. Simon watched with thinly disguised satisfaction, as if he had won an important battle. The other employees noticed but didn't comment, except Roderick, who looked at her with a mixture of pity and frustration. One Thursday night during her shift at the hotel, Marina was organizing some papers when Roderick approached the counter. He had been observing her with concern in recent days, realizing that something was not right. "Marina, can I say something without you telling me to mind my own business?" he began, leaning his elbows on the counter. "Depends on what you're going to say," she replied without looking up from the documents. "You're sabotaging yourself." Now she looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You met someone who clearly cares about you, who makes you smile in a way I've never seen before, and you're throwing it all away out of fear. Am I right or am I right?" Marina sighed. "It's not that simple, Roderick. You don't understand the differences between us." "I don't understand?" Roderick laughed without humor. "Marina, I'm a black gay man from Birmingham, working in a luxury hotel in London. Do you think I don't know what it's like to deal with differences? That I don't know what it's like to feel I don't belong in certain places? It's different. It's always different. But, you know what I learned? That we waste our whole lives waiting for the perfect moment, the ideal situation, the right circumstances. And you know what happens? Life passes, opportunities pass, and we're left alone with our fears and regrets. Marina felt her eyes sting. But what if it goes wrong? What if I get hurt? And what if it goes right? What if you let the chance to be happy pass because you were too busy with the fear of suffering? She remained silent, processing his words. Roderick was right, and she knew it, but knowing didn't make things easier. That same night, around 3 in the morning, when the hotel was immersed in the characteristic silence of the early hours, Marina made a decision. She picked up her phone, opened the messaging app, and typed with trembling fingers. "Can we talk? Tomorrow, if you can." The reply came in less than a minute. "Of course, wherever and whenever you want." Marina suggested a coffee shop near Regent's Park, away from the hotel, away from curious glances. They arranged to meet at 3 in the afternoon on Friday, right after her shift ended. She spent the rest of the early morning in a state of anxiety mixed with hope. She didn't know exactly what she was going to say, how she was going to explain the 2 weeks of silence, how she was going to verbalize the whirlwind of feelings she carried. But she knew she had to try. Roderick was right. She deserved at least to try. When her shift ended on Friday morning, Marina went straight home. She took a long shower, trying to wash away the accumulated fatigue along with the dirt from her body. She chose a simple outfit she liked, a dark blue dress her grandmother had given her for her last birthday. She tied her hair in a loose ponytail, applied light makeup. She arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. It was a small, cozy place with wooden tables and mismatched chairs. The walls were decorated with old photos of London, and there was a pleasant smell of fresh coffee and grilled bread. She ordered a chamomile tea and sat at a corner table, from where she could see the entrance door. Edward arrived exactly at 3. Marina saw him enter, looking for her with his eyes. When he found her, his face lit up with a smile that was both hopeful and cautious. He looked thinner with deep dark circles that betrayed sleepless nights. He wore jeans and a simple grey shirt. He had walked straight from the office, she imagined. "Hi," he said, stopping by the table. "Hi, sit down, please." Edward sat down, ordered a coffee from the passing waiter, and then they were silent for a few seconds that seemed eternal. Marina nervously fiddled with the paper napkin as she searched for the right words. "Marina, I know you asked for this meeting, but I need to say something first," Edward began, leaning slightly forward. "These 2 weeks have been the worst I've experienced in a long time. Not just because you distanced yourself, but because I realized how much I messed everything up. You were right about everything you said. I was trying to protect you from my world, but in reality, I was just being cowardly. I was afraid to expose you to those people, afraid that you would see me in that reality and realize that I wasn't as different from them as I wanted to be." Marina listened in silence, seeing the vulnerability etched on his face. "But you deserve more than to be hidden," Edward continued. "You deserve to be introduced to the world as someone important in my life. And if my friends can't see you the way I see you, then it's them who don't deserve to be part of my life, not the other way around." "Thank you for saying that," Marina said softly. "But I also need to apologize. I ran away at the first sign of difficulty. I let Simon's words, my own insecurities, speak louder than what I feel for you. And I'm so sorry for that. You don't need to apologize. You were protecting yourself. But I don't want to live like that. I don't want to spend my whole life protecting myself so much that I end up not truly living anything." Marina took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Edward, I like you. A lot. And that scares me because I've never felt anything like this before. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting the differences between us or what people will think be more important than what we feel." Edward's eyes sparkled. "Does that mean you want to try? Really try?" "I do, but I need you to be honest with me about everything, about your life, your friends, your business. I don't want to be protected from reality. I want to know who you really are, the good and the bad." Edward extended his hand across the table, and Marina took it. "I promise, total transparency. And you can tell me everything too. Your doubts, your fears, your frustrations. We're in this together now." They stayed like that for a few moments, holding hands across the table, smiling at each other like two teenagers experiencing first love. There was something renewed in that moment, as if they were starting over, but this time on more solid ground. "So," Edward said with a wider smile, "do you want to see my place?" Marina's eyes widened. "Now?" "Why not? I promised total transparency. My home is an important part of my life. I want you to know it." "All right," Marina agreed, feeling a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. They left the coffee shop and went to Edward's car. During the drive, he explained that he lived in an apartment in Mayfair, relatively close to the hotel, in fact. "It was always practical," he said. "I preferred to be close to everything rather than have a secluded mansion." The building was discreet on the outside, without excessive ostentation, but clearly high-end. The facade was made of smoked glass and grey granite, with well-maintained planters at the entrance. The doorman, a middle-aged man impeccably uniformed, greeted Edward by name and looked at Marina with thinly disguised curiosity, certainly wondering who this simple young woman was, accompanying one of the building's most distinguished residents. In the elevator, ascending to the 12th floor, Marina felt her nervousness increase. The walls were mirrored and she avoided looking at her own reflection, afraid of seeing the insecurity stamped on her face. Edward, beside her, seemed calm, but held her hand firmly, as if wanting to convey reassurance through touch. The apartment was surprisingly welcoming. Marina expected something cold and minimalist, the kind that appears in decoration magazines, but no one actually lives in, with designer furniture and expensive works of art on the walls. Instead, she found a spacious area, yes, with high ceilings and huge windows, but one that had life, that had soul. There were books scattered everywhere, some piled on the floor next to a worn leather reading armchair near the window. The armchair had a blanket draped over the back and a reading lamp beside it, creating a perfect spot to spend hours immersed in stories. On the walls, instead of expensive paintings, there were black and white photographs of various places, some Marina recognized as old London, others from cities she couldn't identify. The view of the city was impressive, with London's buildings stretching as far as the eye could see, creating a concrete and glass jungle that glowed under the late afternoon light. Marina approached the window, fascinated. She had never been so high, never seen the city from that perspective. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Edward said, coming to stand beside her. "It's stunning. From here everything seems so small, so ordered, as if the city made sense. It's an illusion, of course, but sometimes we need illusions to bear reality." "It's beautiful," Marina said, turning slowly to observe everything more carefully. "But it's not what I expected. I thought it would be more impersonal, colder." "Most people have the same impression," Edward laughed, and there was relief in his voice, as if her approval mattered greatly. "My decorator was frustrated because I wouldn't let him do a chic minimalist job, all white and grey with ultra-modern furniture. I preferred to leave it the way that makes me feel at home, even if it's not what's expected of an apartment like this." He showed her the entire apartment, the kitchen he rarely used because he didn't know how to cook, the office filled with papers and documents, the bedroom simple but comfortable, with a large bed and more bookshelves, and finally the room he called his personal library, a smaller room completely lined with books from floor to ceiling. "My favorite place," he said, entering the room. "I spend hours here when I need to think or when the world outside gets too heavy." Marina ran her fingers along the shelves, reading the titles. There was everything, classics of English and world literature, philosophy, history, even some contemporary novels. She noticed that many books had bookmarks between the pages and annotations in the margins. "You really read all of this?" "I do. It's my addiction. Some people collect cars or expensive watches. I collect books." "That's a much better addiction." They sat on the living room sofa, drinking wine that Edward took from a small wine cellar in the kitchen. The conversation flowed naturally, as it always did between them. Edward told her more about his life, about the constant pressure to keep the company running, about the partners who only cared about profit, about the difficult decisions he had to make almost daily. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about all the families that were displaced because of my ventures," he confessed, looking at his wine glass. "I know the real estate market works like this, that I'm just playing the game like everyone else, but that doesn't make it any easier to swallow." "Have you ever thought about changing, doing things differently?" "I do, but it's complicated when you're not alone in the business. I have 3 main partners. One of them, Marcus, has been my friend since university. He's the one who helped me start the company. The other 2 are investors who came in later. They want quick results, large profit margins. I tried to propose more social projects with a positive impact on communities, but I was vetoed." "What if you left? Started something new on your own?" Edward looked at her in surprise. "I've thought about it, but it would be starting from scratch, losing everything I've built. It would be losing the material things you've built, but you would gain your peace of mind, your integrity." He fell silent, processing those words. Marina saw that she had touched on something important, a wound Edward carried, but rarely exposed. "You're right," he finally said. "I've been living on autopilot for so long that I forgot I can make different choices, that I can prioritize what really matters. It's never too late to change." They talked until the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and purple through the wide windows. Marina told him more about her childhood, in Stratford-upon-Avon, about the parents she lost too early and barely remembered, about the grandmother who was mother, father, and friend. She spoke about the dreams she had as a child, of being a teacher or a librarian, and how those dreams were postponed and forgotten as the need to survive became more urgent. "You can still achieve those dreams," Edward said. "It's not too late." "With what money? I can barely pay my bills. University is a luxury I can't afford." "What if I helped you?" Marina tensed. "We've talked about this. I don't want your financial help." "Why not?" "It wouldn't be charity. It would be an investment in someone I believe in, someone I know will make a difference in the world." "Even so, I need to do this myself. I need to know I can." Edward nodded, respecting her position even as he saw her stubbornness. "I understand, but know that the offer stands, whenever you change your mind." When the sky was completely dark and the city lights shone like a mantle of terrestrial stars, creating an urban constellation that stretched to the horizon, Edward asked if Marina wanted to have dinner right there. would order delivery from a good restaurant in the area. Marina hesitated, looking at the clock that showed almost 8:30 at night. She had been there for hours, and time had flown by. "I have to work tomorrow," she began, but the voice didn't sound very convincing even to herself. "You work at night, don't you? You can rest here for a few hours and go straight home in the morning. I have a comfortable guest room. Or I can take you home now if you prefer, of course." Marina looked into his eyes, searching for ulterior motives, some sign that this was a pretext for something more. But she found only sincerity and a genuine desire for her to stay, for them to extend that moment of connection for a few more hours. "All right, but no expensive restaurant. Let's just order a pizza." "Pizza, then?" Edward smiled, clearly happy with her decision. "Any preference?" "Mozzarella. Simple and perfect." Couldn't agree more. They ordered a large mozzarella pizza with a stuffed crust and a 2-liter Coke to go with it. While waiting for the delivery, Edward put on some soft instrumental music, creating a cozy atmosphere. They sat on the living room sofa, talking about everything and nothing, sharing opinions on music, movies, childhood memories. When the pizza arrived, Edward suggested they eat in the living room, sitting on the floor like two university students on a study night. He grabbed a towel to cover the floor, brought plates and napkins, and opened the pizza box, revealing the still bubbling and fragrant cheese. They laughed at silly things as they ate, told funny childhood stories, shared memories they had never shared with anyone. Edward recounted the time he tried to bake a cake for his mother's birthday and almost set the kitchen on fire. Marina spoke about when she decided to paint her grandmother's house as a surprise and ended up painting the neighbor's cat that happened to pass by at the wrong moment. It was light, carefree, genuinely happy. The kind of simple happiness that doesn't need grand gestures or sophisticated places, just two people who like each other sharing an authentic moment. Later, when Marina said she was sleepy, Edward showed her the guest room. It was a simple but comfortable room, with a double bed, a wardrobe, and a window overlooking the building's courtyard. He lent her a clean t-shirt to use as pajamas. "Anything you need, just call me. My room is next door." "Thank you, Edward, for everything." He smiled, lightly touched her face with the back of his fingers, a tender and chaste gesture. "Sleep well, Marina." "You too." Marina closed the door, changed clothes, and lay down on the comfortable bed. She looked at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened that day. The conversation at the coffee shop, the reconciliation, seeing his home, the growing intimacy between them. She felt happy in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. But she also felt fear that it was too good to be true, that something would go wrong, that she would get hurt in a way she wouldn't be able to recover from. She picked up her phone and sent a quick message to her grandmother, as she always did before bed. "I'm fine, Grandma. Hope you are too. I love you." The reply came a few minutes later. "I love you too, my child. You seem different these past few weeks, lighter. I'm happy." Marina smiled. Her grandmother always knew, always noticed when something changed, even from a distance. She put her phone away and closed her eyes, letting exhaustion take over. The next morning she woke up to the smell of fresh coffee. She got up, still wearing Edward's borrowed t-shirt, and went to the kitchen. She found him there, already dressed for work in smart trousers and a white shirt, preparing breakfast. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "I hope you slept well." "I did. That bed is very comfortable. I made coffee, toast, and fruit. I'm not a great cook, but I can manage that." They sat at the kitchen table and had breakfast together, while talking about the day's plans. Edward had meetings in the morning, but would be free in the afternoon. Marina needed to go home, rest for a few hours before her night shift. They agreed to see each other on Sunday, perhaps go to a park or just spend the day together without commitments. As Marina was about to leave, Edward held her hand. "I want you to know that yesterday was special for me, having you here in my home, sharing this space with you. It's been a long time since I felt so at ease with someone." "It was special for me too," Marina replied, and it was true. He walked her to the door and before she left, leaned in and kissed her forehead delicately. It was a simple, almost innocent gesture, but it carried a tenderness that made Marina's heart ache. "We'll talk later," he said. "We'll talk." Marina left the apartment floating. In the elevator, on the way to the underground, throughout the entire journey back home, she felt different, lighter, more hopeful, more alive. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she deserved to be happy. But happiness, as Marina would soon discover, sometimes comes with new challenges. At the hotel, Simon had not given up his vigilance. In fact, he had intensified it. He knew something was happening. He could see it in her eyes, in the way she carried herself, in the way she smiled to herself when she thought no one was looking. The following Monday, during Marina's shift, Simon appeared at reception with a severe expression. "Miss Costa, I need to speak with you in my office, now." Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. She followed him to the office, her heart pounding. When the door closed behind her, Simon went straight to the point. "I've received information that you were seen leaving the building where Mr. Edward Alistair lives last Saturday morning." Marina felt her blood run cold. "Who told you that?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you continue to be involved with a frequent guest of the hotel despite my warnings. This is unacceptable. I wasn't working. What I do in my free time is none of your business. It is when it involves hotel clients, and especially when it can harm our reputation." "What reputation?" "I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't stolen, I haven't been rude, I haven't failed to fulfill my obligations. Having a relationship with someone outside my working hours is not a crime." Simon's eyes turned cold. "I see you don't understand the gravity of the situation, so I will be clearer. Either you end this involvement immediately, or you will have to look for another job. The choice is yours." Marina felt rage boil within her. "This is unfair, and you know it." "Life is unfair, Miss Costa. The sooner you accept that, the better. You have until Friday to decide. If you choose to keep your job, I want written confirmation that you have ended any personal relationship with Edward Alistair. Otherwise, prepare your letter of resignation." He gestured, indicating the conversation was over. Marina left the office trembling with anger and humiliation. She went straight to the bathroom, locked herself in a cubicle, and let the tears fall. They were not tears of sadness, but of indignation. How dared he? How did he think he had the right to control her personal life in such a way? But at the same time, she felt fear. She needed that job. Without it, how would she pay the rent? How would she survive in London? She had no savings, no support network, nowhere to go. When she calmed down, she washed her face and returned to work. She spent the rest of the night on autopilot, performing her duties mechanically. When her shift ended, instead of going home, she walked aimlessly through the streets of London. The sun was rising, painting the sky pink and orange, but she barely noticed the beauty around her. Finally, she stopped on a park bench and pulled out her phone. She typed a message to Edward, telling him everything that had happened. Her fingers trembled as she wrote. When she finished, she hesitated before sending. Would he understand? Would he not think she was being weak or overreacting? But then she remembered the promise they had made to each other, total transparency. To share everything, the good and the bad. She pressed send. The reply came 15 minutes later. "Where are you? I'll come get you." She sent her location and waited. 20 minutes later, Edward's car pulled up in front of the park. He got out in a hurry, still in his pajamas. With a coat over them, his hair messy, he ran to her and hugged her tightly. "This won't stand," he said, his voice tense with anger. "I'm going to have a word with that man." "No, please. It'll just make everything worse." "Then I'll buy the hotel." Marina pulled away, looking at him in disbelief. "What?" "I'll buy the hotel. I'll fire that idiot. Problem solved." "Edward, you can't just buy a hotel because my boss is being difficult." "Yes, I can, and I will." "No," Marina was firm. "I don't want you to solve my problems that way. I don't want to owe you anything. I don't want our relationship to be based on you saving me all the time. Then what do you want to do?" "I want to think. I want to find a solution that is mine, that comes from me. Give me until Friday. That's the deadline Simon gave me anyway." Edward looked at her for a long moment. "All right, but know that I'm here, for whatever you need. I know. And that means a lot. He took her home and stayed until she fell asleep, sitting beside the narrow bed, holding her hand. When Marina finally drifted off, physically and emotionally exhausted, Edward kissed her forehead and left in silence, but not before leaving a note on the bedside table. You are stronger than you imagine. You will find a way out, and I will be here no matter what you decide. I admire you more than you know. Marina found the note when she woke up hours later. She read and reread it, feeling her eyes fill with tears again, but this time they were not tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of something that was beginning to look dangerously like love. The days until Friday passed like an agonizing countdown. Marina oscillated between the determination not to give in to Simon's pressures and the paralyzing fear of losing her only means of support in London. She talked at length with Edward about the situation, and he respected her desire to find her own solution, even though he clearly suffered watching her go through it. On Thursday night, during a break from work, Marina sat in the empty staff changing room and called Grandma Helena. She needed to hear her grandmother's voice. She needed that simple and profound wisdom that only she possessed. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number she knew by heart. "Grandma, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my child. You can ask anything you want. Always. How do you know when something is worth fighting for? When is it worth risking everything, letting go of security and just jumping into the void?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Marina could imagine her grandmother sitting in the rocking chair on the porch, the one that creaked softly with movement, looking at the distant mountains as she thought about the right answer. Grandma Helena never answered important questions hastily. "You know what I've learned in life, Marina, that we always regret the things we didn't do more than the things we did, the risks we didn't take, the words we didn't say, the love we didn't live out of fear of suffering. Security is important, yes, but a whole life without risks, without moments of courage, is a half-life. It's like reading a book, skipping the most important pages. But what if it goes wrong, Grandma? What if I lose everything? What if I risk it and get hurt so deeply that I can't recover? Then you start over, my child. You are young, strong, intelligent. You have your whole life ahead of you. Did you fall? Get up. Did you make a mistake? Learn. Did you suffer? Heal. But if you let fear decide for you now, if you let insecurity prevent you from living fully, you will carry that regret forever. And believe me, carrying the weight of what could have been is much heavier than carrying the pain of having tried and failed." Marina felt her eyes fill with warm tears that slowly ran down her face. "Thank you, Grandma. I really needed to hear that. Sometimes I feel so lost, so small in the face of everything." "You were never small, Marina. You were always a brave girl. You had the courage to come to London alone, to start from scratch, to survive in a city you didn't know. That same courage is inside you now. You just need to remember it." And Edward, whoever this man is that makes you ask these things, if he makes you shine the way your voice is shining right now as you talk about him, then he is worth it. Worth every risk, every tear, every moment of uncertainty. How do you know it's about a man? Grandma Helena chuckled softly, that laugh full of tenderness and wisdom. "Because I've known you since you were born, my child. Because I heard that same doubt, that same fear in your voice when you were 5 years old, and asked if you could trust people after losing your parents. And because I recognize in the tone of your voice now the same tone my voice had when I spoke of your grandfather, God rest his soul, it was that same mix of fear and enchantment, of wanting something badly but being afraid to surrender completely." After hanging up, Marina stared at her phone for long minutes. Her grandmother was right. She always was. It was time to stop letting fear dictate her choices. It was time to fight for what she wanted, for what she deserved. On Friday morning, as her shift was about to end, Marina typed a short and direct letter of resignation. It communicated her immediate departure from the company, thanked them for the opportunity, and offered to work her notice period if required. She printed 2 copies, signed them, placed them in an envelope and left it on Simon's desk before leaving. Her heart pounded as she walked towards the exit. Roderick saw her and ran after her. "Marina, what did you do?" "What I should have done a long time ago. I resigned. His eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously? I won't let anyone control my personal life. I won't give up my happiness for a job that makes me feel invisible. Roderick hugged her tightly. I'm proud of you, really. And if you need anything, you can count on me. Thank you, Roderick, for everything. You were the best part of working here. She left the hotel with the strange sensation of jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Scared, yes, but free. She sent a message to Edward. I resigned. I need to see you. The reply came immediately. Where are you? I'll come get you now. They met at the same coffee shop where they had reconciled weeks ago. Edward arrived in a hurry, still in his suit because he had come from a meeting, and hugged her as soon as he saw her. Are you sure about this? I don't want you making rash decisions because of me. It wasn't because of you. It was because of me. Marina held his face in her hands. It was because I realized I deserve to be happy. I deserve to work in a place that values me. I deserve to be with someone who makes me feel alive. And I won't let men like Simon tell me what I can or cannot do with my life. Edward kissed her. It wasn't a passionate and urgent kiss, but soft and tender, full of promise and respect. It was their first kiss, and Marina felt as if all the pieces finally fell into place. When they separated, Edward held her hands. I have a proposal. I don't want it to be seen as an attempt to control you or solve your problems, but as a true partnership. I'm listening. I'm thinking of leaving the company, of starting over doing something that truly matters, and I wanted you to be a part of it. Not as an employee, but as a partner. We can create something together, something that unites our dreams. Marina looked at him in surprise. What exactly are you talking about? Remember when you said your dream was to open a community library back home? What if we did that? But not just a library, a complete cultural center, with a library, reading and writing workshops, free courses, space for community events. It could be in Stratford-upon-Avon, in your town. You know the community's needs. I can help with the initial capital and business management. Edward, that would cost a lot of money. I have enough savings, and more than that, I have the desire to do something that truly makes a difference. I'm tired of building buildings that only benefit those who already have money. I want to build something that truly transforms lives. Marina felt her eyes fill with tears. That would be incredible. But these are our dreams. I don't want you to invest everything and then regret it. I won't regret it. And it wouldn't be an investment. It would be a new beginning. For both of us. They spent the next few hours planning, daydreaming, sketching ideas for what this cultural center would be like on napkins. Marina felt an excitement she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, the future seemed full of possibilities instead of just uncertainties. But then, the following Monday, something unexpected happened. Marina received a call from an unknown number. It was a lawyer working for an investment group. Ms. Marina Costa, my name is Dr. Felicity Rivers. I'm calling on behalf of Alistair Investments. Mr. Edward Alistair would like to offer you a job proposal. Marina frowned, confused. Excuse me, but I've already discussed work with Edward. I don't understand why he would send a lawyer. You're not understanding. The proposal doesn't come from Mr. Edward personally, but from his company. Recently, Alistair Investments acquired the Kensington Grand through a subsidiary. As the new owner, the company is making administrative changes, and we would like to offer you the position of Client Services Manager. Marina felt her blood run cold. Edward bought the hotel. When? The acquisition was finalized last week. Mr. Edward preferred to maintain discretion throughout the process. I see. Thank you for the call, but I'm not interested in the position. She hung up, her hands trembling with anger. She immediately called Edward. You bought the hotel, he answered on the second ring. Marina, let me explain. No, you promised me you wouldn't do that. You promised me you would respect my decisions. And I did. I didn't buy the hotel to help you. I bought it because it was a good investment, and because Simon was being investigated for harassment against several employees. Roderick approached me with evidence, testimonies from other people. The hotel was vulnerable, and I took the opportunity. And were you planning to tell me about this? Yes, I was. Today, in fact. I was waiting for the final document so I could explain everything properly. I don't believe you. Marina felt tears burn her eyes. You did exactly what you said you wouldn't. You invaded my life, made decisions without consulting me. It wasn't like that. Edward sounded desperate. Please, let me explain in person. Let's talk. I don't want to talk right now. I need to think. She hung up before he could reply. She sat on the floor of her cramped room and cried. She cried from anger, from frustration, from disappointment. But more than that, she cried because a part of her knew she was being unfair. Edward hadn't bought the hotel just for her. There were other valid reasons, but the fact that he hadn't told her, that he had kept it a secret, hurt deeply. In the following days, Marina ignored his calls and messages. She needed space, time to process everything. And the more she thought, the more she realized that maybe it wasn't just about the hotel. It was about everything. About the differences between them, about the fear of not being enough, about the insecurity of being in a relationship where his gestures, however grand and well-intentioned, would always make her feel indebted. On Thursday she made a decision. She called Grandma, Helena. Grandma, can I spend a few days with you there? Of course, my child. You always can. Has something happened? I just need some time away from here, away from everything. Come. Your home is waiting for you. Marina bought a bus ticket for the next day. She packed a small bag with essentials, notified her landlord that she would be away for a few days. She sent a single message to Edward. I'm going to spend some time back home. I need to think about us, about everything. I don't know when I'll be back. He replied almost instantly. Can I come visit you? No, please, give me this time. All right, but know that I love you and I'll be here waiting no matter how much time you need. Marina read the message several times. It was the first time he had openly said he loved her, and she realized with a pang in her heart that she loved him too. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it takes more than love to make things work. The coach journey lasted 8 hours. Marina spent most of the time looking out the window, watching London's urban landscape gradually give way to the green of the Warwickshire hills. She saw the city sprawl give way to country estates, the giant buildings shrinking until they became simple cottages, the grey of concrete being replaced by the green of trees and the blue of the clean rural sky. Every mile driven seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders. When she finally arrived in Stratford-upon-Avon, it was already night. The small coach station was almost empty, lit by yellow lamps that attracted moths. The air had a different smell, cleaner, with a hint of damp earth even though it hadn't rained. Grandma. Helena was waiting for her, sitting on a bench, small and smiling, her white hair tied in her usual bun and gleaming under the lampposts. She wore a simple floral dress and a crocheted shawl over her shoulders. My child, her grandmother said, getting up with some difficulty and opening her arms. How I missed you. How I missed having you near. They hugged tightly, and Marina let her tears fall freely. They were tears of relief, of exhaustion, of finally being home. Me too, Grandma. I missed you so much too. A taxi took them through the sleeping town to her grandmother's house, that same simple 3-room cottage where Marina had grown up. It had light-colored walls, blue-painted wooden windows, a small front garden full of flowers that Grandma Helena lovingly tended. When they entered, Marina felt as if she was stepping back in time. Everything was exactly as she remembered. The same wooden table in the kitchen, the same chintz curtains, the same worn sofa in the living room, the same photos on the wall. I prepared your room, Grandma Helena said. I changed the sheets, put fresh flowers. Everything is ready for you to rest. Marina entered, the small room that had been hers for so many years. It was tiny, with just enough space for a single bed, a small wardrobe, and a desk. But it was clean, fragrant, welcoming. On the desk, she saw her old books still neatly arranged, the rag dolls her grandmother had made for her as a child. A photo of her with her parents when she was just 3 years old, shortly before the accident. That night, she slept deeply for the first time in weeks. She woke up to the sound of birds singing and sunlight streaming through the window. She could hear Grandma Helena in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The smell of homemade bread and fresh coffee filled the house. In the following days, Marina allowed herself simply to exist without pressure, without demands. She woke up late, without an alarm clock, when her body asked. She had breakfast on the porch looking at the mountains, observing the quiet movement of the small town where everyone knew everyone. She helped her grandmother with household chores, swept the yard, watered the flowers, prepared lunch. In the afternoon, she read the old books she had left behind, lying in the hammock on the porch. At night, she sat with Grandma Helena to watch soap operas and talk about life, about everything and nothing. It was a routine completely different from the frantic life of London. There were no car horns, no rush, no crowds, just time passing slowly, the hours stretching out pleasantly, life happening at the pace it should. Little by little, she told her grandmother everything. About Edward, about the hotel, about the shared dreams and the fears that paralyzed her. Grandma Helena listened in silence, just holding her hand now and then. "You know what I think. My child," her grandmother said one of those nights, "I think you're afraid to be happy. You spent so long fighting, so long just surviving, that when happiness truly appeared, you didn't know what to do with it." "But Grandma, he bought an entire hotel. How can I compete with that? How can I be in a relationship where he can simply buy solutions for all problems?" "You don't need to compete. A relationship isn't a competition, it's a partnership. He has money, you have other equally valuable things. You have wisdom, you have connection with people, you have your feet on the ground. You complete each other, you don't compete." "But I feel indebted, I feel smaller." "That's pride, Marina. Pride disguised as independence. And I understand where it comes from. I understand that you want to prove to yourself that you can do it alone. But sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. It's recognizing that we are human, that we need each other." Marina fell silent, processing her grandmother's words. Was she right? Was what Marina called independence actually just fear of becoming vulnerable? A week after arriving in Stratford-upon-Avon, Marina was helping her grandmother in the small grocery store she still ran when she received a message from Roderick. "Marina, I need to tell you something. Simon was fired. Investigation confirmed harassment against at least 6 employees. And what's more, the new hotel owner is looking for you. He left an envelope with a proposal. I don't know what it is, but it seems important." Marina stared at the message for long minutes. So it was true. Edward really had reasons beyond her to buy the hotel. Simon really was under investigation. She had misjudged the situation, allowed insecurity to speak louder than reason. That night she called Edward for the first time since leaving London. "Hi," she said when he answered. "Marina." His voice was full of contained emotion. "How are you?" "I'm good. And you?" "Surviving. Waiting for you." "Edward, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for reacting that way, for not giving you a chance to explain. You don't need to apologize. You had every right to be upset. I should have told you about the hotel sooner." "Roderick told me about Simon's investigation." "Yes. When he came to me with the evidence, I realized it was an opportunity to do 2 things at once. Remove that man from a position of power where he only caused harm, and make a solid investment. The hotel is profitable, Marina. It wasn't charity, it was business. I know, and thank you for doing that. Not just for me, but for all the employees he mistreated." There was a pause. Then Edward asked, his voice hesitant, "Are you coming back?" "Yes, but not to work at the hotel. I'm coming back because I want to be with you, because I love you, and because I want to build something by your side." She heard his breath catch on, the other end of the line. "You love me." "I do. It took me a long time to admit it to myself and to you, but I do, and I want to try. I want to make it work. I love you too, more than I can express in words." "Then let's make a deal. Total honesty from now on, no secrets, no trying to protect each other. Total trust." Deal. Marina returned to London the following week. Edward picked her up at the coach station, and when she got off the bus and saw him waiting there with a simple bouquet of daisies, her heart overflowed. They ran to each other and hugged tightly for a long time, indifferent to the people passing by. In the following months, they worked together on the Cultural Centre project with a dedication that surprised even themselves. Edward did indeed leave the investment company in a tense meeting where the partners tried to dissuade him, offered more money, more profit-sharing. But he was unyielding. He sold his share, took the money, and invested in a dream that finally made sense. With that capital and Marina's tireless help, they bought an old mansion in Stratford-upon-Avon that had been abandoned for years. It was a beautiful early 20th century building with colonial architecture, tall doors and windows, hardwood floors, exposed ceiling beams. It was in terrible condition, with leaks, rotten wood, broken windows, weeds taking over everything. But it had potential, it had history, it had soul. The renovation lasted 6 months. Edward hired a team that respected the original characteristics of the property. Marina coordinated everything, from construction details to planning how each space would be used. They transformed the spacious rooms into a library with custom-made wooden shelves that went from floor to ceiling. They created cozy classrooms for workshops. They set up a small but functional auditorium for cultural events, presentations, lectures. They made a playroom for younger children. They left an open space in the backyard for outdoor activities. Marina coordinated everything personally. She visited second-hand bookstores in several towns in the region, buying used books at affordable prices. She contacted publishers asking for donations. She created social media campaigns, asking people to donate books they no longer read. The response was surprising. In 3 months, they had over 5,000 volumes catalogued and organized. She also took care of hiring teachers for the workshops. She looked for people from the community itself who had skills to teach. Mrs. Mary, who embroidered beautifully, would give embroidery workshops. Mr. James, a retiree who always worked with carpentry, would teach children to work with wood. Professor Clara, a recent literature graduate, would coordinate the book clubs and creative writing workshops. Edward handled the administrative and financial side with the same dedication. He created an NGO to manage the centre, ensuring that everything was done legally and transparently. He established partnerships with the local council, with regional companies, with the county government. He set up an efficient management system that would ensure the project's long-term sustainability. They worked side by side, building something that was theirs, that represented the values they shared, that had real meaning. The inauguration took place on a sunny Saturday afternoon. They had spread posters throughout the town in the preceding weeks, advertised on local radios, social media, by word of mouth. But nothing prepared Marina for the number of people who showed up. It seemed the entire town was there. Parents with children, curious elderly people, excited young people, municipal school teachers, shopkeepers, all sorts of people. Grandma Helena cut the red ribbon with tears of pride in her eyes, her hands trembling with emotion. "I never thought I'd see something like this in our town," she said, her voice choked. "A place where everyone can learn, can grow, can dream." Children ran inside as soon as the doors opened, amazed by the quantity of books on the shelves. Many had never been in a library before, had never had free access to so many books. They carefully pulled volumes from the shelves, leafed through the pages, smelled the paper. Their little eyes shone with enchantment. Adults slowly circulated through the spaces, appreciating every detail. They were already signing up for literacy courses, for basic computer workshops, for reading clubs. There was a huge queue to get a library membership card, which was completely free. Marina circulated through all the rooms, receiving hugs, answering questions, seeing the happiness etched on people's faces. At one point, she stopped in a corner and just observed everything. She saw ladies browsing cookbooks, young people looking for novels, children sitting on the floor reading comic books, a group of teenagers discovering manga. It was exactly as she had dreamed. Even better. Edward came to stand beside her, putting his arm around her waist. "We did it," Marina said, her voice choked with emotion, wiping away a tear that insisted on falling. "No, you did it. I just helped make it possible. But this," he gestured, encompassing the entire space, "this is your dream coming true. It's your courage, your vision, your love for this community. It's our dream now, our project, our way of making a difference in the world." A few months later, on a quiet evening in Stratford-upon-Avon, Edward proposed to Marina. It wasn't elaborate or ostentatious. They were on Grandma Helena's porch, drinking coffee and looking at the stars, when he simply took her hand and said, "Marry me. It doesn't have to be now. It doesn't have to be in grand style. It just has to be forever." Marina laughed and cried at the same time. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was simple, in the village church, with the presence of her grandmother, Roderick, who had become an inseparable friend, and a few close people. Marina wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her grandmother. Edward wore a suit but no tie in the casual way he liked. During the ceremony, when they exchanged vows, Marina said something that summed up their entire journey. "You taught me that true love isn't about solving all problems, but about giving you the courage to face them. Thank you for showing me that I deserve to be happy, that I can dream big, that I can be loved exactly as I am." Edward, with tears in his eyes, replied, "And you taught me that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we build with the people we love. You taught me that power isn't about buying things, but about creating something that transforms lives. Thank you for saving me from myself." Years later, sitting in the library they had created together, watching children avidly reading in every corner, Marina thought about their entire journey, about the lonely nights in London, about the fear that paralyzed her, about the difficult choices she had to make, about the love she almost let slip away. Had it been easy? No. There were still challenges, still difficult days, but now they faced them together. Edward had learned to respect her independence, and she had learned to accept help, without feeling diminished. They built a true partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and deep love. The cultural center prospered, transforming the lives of hundreds of people. They offered not just books and courses, but hope, possibilities, the chance to dream beyond the limitations imposed by reality. And Marina, the country girl who had arrived in London feeling invisible, was now seen, valued, loved. Not because someone saved her, but because she herself had the courage to save herself, to choose happiness, to fight for the love she deserved. And Edward, the businessman who lived trapped in a golden cage, was now free. Free to make choices aligned with his values, free to love without barriers, free to be simply human. Together, they proved that true love knows no class or origin differences, that it is built slowly, with patience, respect, and trust, that it demands courage to face fears and vulnerabilities, and that in the end, it is worth every tear, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty. Because when it is real, when it is true, love has the power to transform not just two lives, but the world around them. Dear listeners, we hope Marina and Edward's story has touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of love, overcoming, and courage, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it the first time they met at the hotel, the reconciliation at the bookstore, or the emotional ending? Every day we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, the dilemmas of the heart, and the strength of true love. Don't miss the next episode. We await you here again for another story that will stir your emotions,